Hello and welcome to today's webinar. We have Bob Hivner and Bob Griffin, both from Legrande, talking about the Vaddio 2x1 bridge and the capabilities it will have with working with Zoom, with WebEx, with Teams, and any other application that you might have. Thank you all for joining us. I appreciate you watching, and we do have a Q&A section, so launch that on the side there. Ask us any questions. The presenters will answer as we have time to do that. With that being said, I'm going to turn this over to Bob Hivner to give us a brief introduction and talk about the Vaddio 2x1 bridge.
Okay, thanks, Mark. And I'm really happy to be able to present this product to you. I'm going to do a little bit of an introduction. I'm joined virtually by my colleague Bob Griffin, who's the Legrande Vaddio brand specialist. He's going to take us through a hands-on demo of the product, showing some of the interfaces, some of the output of it, and those sorts of things. I'm actually using that unit right now to get onto Teams. I have a Vaddio camera that I'm using here in my office, tied into the switch, and bringing that out to you. So that's how it is. We'll take you through it. We are happy to receive any questions, and I have put my email address down there at the bottom, and my phone number. If anything we can do to help you out, be happy to do that. My role is I'm the Regional Solutions and Consultants Manager, which means I deal with all the brands, working with end users, corporate colleges, universities, consultants, anyone who would be using any of the AV brands, and giving demos, training, and information about all of our products. Just a little bit about Legrande. Legrande is a worldwide company, quite large company, with a number of divisions. If you go into somebody like Lowe's, you can see these things, outlets and power units as broad as that, and then furniture and the Vaddio products are a major portion of what we do. Legrande has actually 6 divisions. Bob and I are part of the audio video division. There's also electrical wiring systems. That's where you see the outlets and power things. Data communications and data center and power products. Those are, you may know, ServerTech and Raritan are the popular names there that broadcasters use a lot in the broadcast data centers. So we kind of overlap in that area. That's handled through our Mid-Atlantic product, and then they also do lighting stuff. Legrande put together an AV division when they bought up a bunch of smaller companies, put them all together, and now it's called Legrande AV. Within that, these are the major brands who, depending on what activities you're involved in, you may have touched any of these. Up in the upper right, there's a daylight screens for projection screen usage. The upper left is Chief, which is mounting products for mounting displays. C2G is cables to go for connectivity, and then down here at the bottom, Mid-Atlantic is probably one that most broadcasters are familiar with because of their racks and power products that they do. And then we have Luxol, is a network switch that we make. It's kind of optimized for AV operations, but that's a switch that we sell. And then Vaddio, and Vaddio is who we're going to really concentrate on today, and specifically on the 2x1. I provided one to Mark, and he's been playing with it and testing it, and said he thought there might be some good applications for you folks to see. So that's really what we're going to talk about. But before I do, I just want to mention a couple things. One is how to find out more information. The best way to do it is to go to our website, legrandeav.com, and in there you can touch any of the brands and drill down and get more information. It's pretty decent product listing that's there. And then also Mid-Atlantic has their own website. We're still in transition. As I mentioned, we bought a bunch of products, so a bunch of brands. So getting them all ported into Legrand AV is still a work in process. But Mid-Atlantic, as you know or may not know, is actually built in Fairfield, New Jersey, and that's a that's they're nearby, and that's why they're pretty popular in this area. I was just on the phone with, you may know, Brandon Ivy. Brandon was the Mid-Atlantic sales guy. He's now our government specialist, so he sells to the federal government across the country. I work closely with him in the DC area, but he said he always enjoyed his interactions with the Philadelphia SMPTE group when he did presentations, and said he'd come visit sometime if we do that again. So we just have to arrange a dinner sometime when we can all get back together, Mark. So let's talk about Vaddio. Vaddio is actually a fairly new company in the history of broadcast and video. But let me see, I'm getting a note here. Network. So Vaddio has been making and selling cameras for a number of years. They actually were founded in 2003, which is fairly recently, and it's basically PTZ cameras with unique connectivity capabilities is what we do. Most often HDMI, but also USB, some streaming, and those sorts of things. The whole product line comes together with the cameras, the camera extensions, USB and conferencing, a little bit of some control capabilities where we can do light production work, and then all the accessories you need to set up your PTZ cameras. Vaddio's theme is the art of easy. The people that we are marketing to and selling to are generally people who are more AV centric. So they're looking for, how can I get this thing installed, have it working and operational fairly easily. So that's what we try to do is make it easy connection, easy setup, solid use, good quality product. Everything comes with a 2-year warranty, parts and labor, and you can call in and get good support during the business hours. So we like doing demos and on-site demos. So if you're interested, I'd be happy to arrange that. Once Governor Wolf unlocks our front door, we can get together and try to see how things work. So today we're going to talk about the 2x1, and I wanted to give you a little bit of history of where the 2x1 came from. For a number of years, we've been selling bridge units, and the bridge units were basically designed to take a video signal in an HDMI format and bridge it over to a soft codec. So we had one we called the AV Bridge, then we had the AV Bridge Conference, and the difference was the AV Bridge Conference brought in external audio from within a room. So if you already have audio in the room and speakers, you could bring that audio into the AV Bridge Conference. And then sometime, I think early last year, we came out with this unit, which is what we call the AV Bridge Mini. And as connectivity was changing, connectivity meaning USB, this one took advantage of USB 3 bandwidths. So the original two, the first two were USB 2, and then the AV Bridge Mini used USB 3. And also you'll notice we started, well, you may not notice, but in this case we moved to a PoE connection, so power over Ethernet in the power input for the unit. So in the AV Bridge Mini, the one thing that people kept saying to us is what we really like is to have 2 inputs. And so that was what brought us to the AV Bridge 2x1. And the 2x1, now you have two inputs and 1 output. And there's a bunch of connectors on the back, and I'm going to go through them individually because I think you'll get a better understanding of it if you see each one of those. but it's basically you have an HDMI out, you simultaneously have a streaming out and a USB 3 output. You can control it with triggers, you have network control, you have front panel control, and you also have acoustic echo cancellation built into much of the audio in this. The AEC is a really important feature for when you're working with Zoom and Skype and those sorts of things, so that you don't get that annoying feedback loop and the noise that brings about. So let's move on to sort of a detailed overview of the 2x1. And so what we're going to do here is, that was kind of my introduction. I'm going to talk a little bit about the application, which I think you'll be able to get pretty quickly. And then I'm going to talk about each of the inputs and kind of how it works, show you a block diagram. And then I'm going to...
Josh, program, know where to go?
Is now exiting.
And then I'm going to turn it over to Bob Griffin, and he's got a live unit that he's working with there that he's going to show a little bit more of the features and some of the control input on the unit. So let's look at this. Well, here's an application. So in this case, what we're doing is up here, these are microphones that are actually a Vaddio microphone, that are a Dante microphone, that are coming in, bringing audio into the unit. And then we have two cameras here, which are bringing HDMI into the unit. And we are coming out with a USB connection to a laptop here, which would be hooked up with Teams or Skype or Zoom or whatever application. And this would be set up with in-room speakers as well. So the microphones, the USB 3 input from the call can all be routed out to the speakers in the room. And then you can also switch between the cameras. So that's kind of the application. It can be used in a classroom environment, it can be used in a conferencing environment, a meeting environment, a lecture, that sort of thing. So you could substitute, instead of one of the cameras, you could put a laptop input into here, or a computer input, and have a PowerPoint. So you have the PowerPoint and the camera on at the same time. So you can do it. Has picture-in-picture capability in it. So we'll touch on that. Bob will show that when we do that. So that's the application for the unit. So let's look at the. We'll go through one at a time and look at each of the connections on the back, because I think that's the best way to understand how it works. The network input, that's where power comes in. It's PoE plus. So if you have a, I think we ship with the unit is a little PoE injector, so that if you don't have a network switch with PoE on it, we'll supply that for you, so you can inject power into the power connector, into the network connector. And then you can also, if you have Dante audio available, you can get your Dante audio in and out of the unit from there. And you can also bring web control and telnet control. We use web control because a lot of people in their classroom environments or in their corporate environments have a control system which needs to talk to this unit and run presets and those sorts of things. So all that's over the network as an option. The USB is USB 3.0. This is bidirectional audio. You get video in and out of it, and this is where you would connect in with your Zoom or Skype or Blue Jeans or Teams, whatever connection that you have. That's the connection that I'm using on our unit right now, is the USB 3 that's coming into my computer. So USB 3 in and out, and also you can have you can send controls by way of remote if the soft client will accept that. RS-232 is sort of legacy. There are still some people who have systems with Crestron or other control systems that want to get in and talk to RS-232. It's cheap, so we put that on there. And then we also have programmable trigger controls, up to 5 hardware controls, and there's also software triggers that you can put in. Those are triggering macros that you can build within the system to do various processes and switches and camera pan and tilt and zoom and switches, anything the unit can do, you can program into a trigger device. So the inputs, the two HDMI inputs will take up to 1080p 60 HDMI with stereo audio. The video processing that we do is we can do picture-in-picture, we can do static graphics, and then it'll do cuts and dissolves. Dissolves are the best looking one between the two video inputs. And then in audio, there's a 12 by 12 matrix. If you count it up, if you look at the Dante, the USB, the stereo, and the audio in and out, you end up with 12 inputs and 12 outputs. So you can switch any input to any output. And then there's also a mic mixer. If you have two microphones coming in, you can mix them together. And then there's the, some EQ and gain and echo cancellation, those sorts of things that the unit can do. HDMI output, basically the HDMI, oops, let me back up. The HDMI output, the USB output, and you can also stream an output out the network. Those three are the same signal that are coming out there. And you'll see that in the block diagram in a second. And then the audio is the input is either mic line level input, and then you get a line level output of a stereo audio. So that's all those in and out. And I'll leave that. Then is all the connections in and out. And you can pretty much get an idea. This is a bit of a, maybe a little bit more than what you should put in one slide, but I think it really captures what's going on here. You can see in the upper left, you have two HDMI inputs into the video processor and the switch. This orange line's the control line. It's coming from down below. The video switch comes out to basically a DA, which puts it out as an HDMI, as USB format, and then also the IP output on the network connection. And then, this would feed the local monitor. This would feed the Zoom or other soft client. And then a lot of people use it for going out to Facebook Live or YouTube for streaming applications. And then here's your count of 12 audio inputs, and then where the audios are distributed around, local for local speakers or into the Dante fabric if you have Dante in your system. The controls, as I mentioned before, are IP control coming in, RS-232. There's a couple buttons on the front panel that you can switch things. I'll show you that in the next slide. And then there's also the trigger terminals. So you could put this in front of somebody, and here's what they can do from the front is that from the front panel, these are actually buttons here that light up when they're live. Is you can swap the inputs from left to right, from input 1 to input 2. You can do the picture-in-picture if you want to do that. You can disable the streaming if you don't want something to get outside the box. You can do that, and then the IP here just hits the. I could hit that button. You could see the what the IP address is of the unit locally. So picture-in-picture, you don't have a lot of movement options, but you can basically set it up as upper left, upper right, lower left, lower right, and then you can do above and below, or you can do a side by side. And that's I think Bob will show you that in the software how you set that. And then some of the keying. This is actually a picture we took off that this is Beth, and she had put this and her name up into this as a key that we can put on the unit. So that key is basically just I think it's JPEG that you store into the graphics box, and then you can move it around anywhere on the screen that you want. So demo. Okay, I'm going to shut off my presentation here, and I'm going to ask Bob to pick it up and he's going to do it. But before we do that, are there any questions that we should address? Anyone has?
Bob, I'm not seeing any questions.
Okay. All right. If you have questions, please feel free to drop them in there. Bob will be happy to address them as well. But I'm off there, so Bob, you should be able to pick it up.
All right, let's see if this is. With any luck, you guys are seeing the interface for the 2x1.
Yes.
And you know what I want to do before I do that, I'm going to show you guys just visually on my input here. So if we switch, I have two camera inputs that are feeding the device. Let's see.
So you have two cameras coming into your 2x1, and then we're looking at the output by way of the Teams call.
That is correct. And for some reason, because we're live, of course, I managed to lose connectivity with the device.
There you go.
So, yeah. Well, welcome
Live
to the
television in action.
Welcome to the real world, right? Bob, go ahead and vamp for a couple minutes here while I figure out what I pressed that I didn't want to press.
Okay. Well, the way the interface works with the Vaddio, and this is true with the cameras or anything, is that you can actually see Bob's IP address on this screen that he's showing there. So you point to the IP address of the unit, and then it will feed out a web GUI, and the web GUI is all the controls that you have. It is password protected. It's interesting because we had at the beginning of this year, beginning of 2020, the California made a law. They actually only passed the law, I think, in October, that said anything that goes out with a an IP address, web GUI type interface, must not go out with a default password in it. So when the first time you connect it up, you either have to have a unique password for that particular device, or you call up the client has to assign one. So it actually was a pain in the neck for our engineering, because we had to go back to all of our products and re-engineer them so that when you turn it on, the first time you turn it on, it comes up with a what do you want to use as a password. So anyway, in our web GUI, all the units have a password protection, which is can be annoying. And we can't build a backdoor into it. We used to always, I'm familiar with putting a backdoor in, which was like the secret password that the customer service guys could get in, but you are not allowed to do that anymore. So if you lose your password, you lose your connectivity, and that's too bad. So maybe Bob lost his password, I don't know. The other thing that Vaddio came out with fairly recently is a deployment tool that we use. A college or university could have multiple systems on a network, or multiple cameras and interface boxes, bridges, and all those things. We now have a deployment tool that goes out, and any network that you can get onto, it will go out and look for Vaddio equipment. And that's a nice tool because it gives you a summary, gives you a list of all the products, you can see what level firmware they're on and do mass updates and easy connectivity into the cameras and devices in the system. So that's another feature of it. Where else can I go with that? There we go. Looks like you're controlling it now, Bob.
Yeah, we're up and running again. It looks like what happened was that little USB-C connector that I have to use on my laptop to connect to the network came slightly loose. So, welcome to the world of things that we don't like about USB connectors, right? So
air gap. Yep.
All right. So switching between inputs, you see that as Bob mentioned, the dissolve is going to be the functionality that you're most going to want to use, not the hard cut, which we did include there for. But the length of the dissolve can run anywhere from 1 second to 1 millisecond. So you've got a fairly decent range to work with. Now, I hope you guys are seeing the SMPTE logo.
Yes.
Up in the corner of this there. So you can store graphic files, JPEG, PNG files. The keying will support alpha, luma, and chroma keying. So depending on the complexity of the graphics they're using, obviously I pulled the JPEG off the website, so I don't have any complexity of that to use for you guys, but just wanted you to see that the graphic is a snap-on or snap-off, but can be controlled via a variety of different functions. And the picture-in-picture is available in a variety of different layouts that Bob pointed. We do, when we do side-by-side or top over bottom, we do maintain aspect ratio, and it can also be in any corner of the screen, though it is not scalable. So it's just a 1/8 corner shot on the picture-in-picture. So I'm going to switch over now to hopefully give you guys a chance to see what the interface looks like. You'll see that I, with each of my inputs here, because they are both camera inputs in this case, I do have full camera control functions here on that input screen. We are able to control the Vaddio cameras over IP, but we're also able to support VSCA over IP protocol for third-party cameras. So something like a Sony BRC, for example, can be controlled via VSCA over IP through this device. My video inputs, as Bob mentioned, are two HDMI inputs. We are limited to 1080p 60 as the max resolution for that. So 720p or 1080p for my inputs. The loop through on the output is also on an HDMI format, and this would be the graphic layout page. So again, I need to create my graphic and we're import it from a third party, stored locally here through this interface, and this allows me to pick where I'm going to put it and size it accordingly on the layout for that. audio functions for this box are quite extensive, again, for a video device. So the 2 mic line analog inputs support the ability to do echo cancellation, noise cancellation, auto gain control. We do put selectable phantom power in there as well as the ability to do high and low pass filters. On your 2 channels of analog output, you have the ability to engage compression and delay, as well as EQ, you see down here. But we're really proud of the fact that we've added 4 channels of bidirectional Dante now. So you'll notice that, of course, your Dante controller is going to assign your routing for that. But within the box, you do have the ability to do individual gain staging on all of those inputs and outputs. And 2 of the Dante channels can be assigned to the echo cancellation reference if you're using those inputs for some type of UC collaboration call, be it WebEx or something like that. Also on the HDMI, it does support embedded stereo audio on both the inputs and outputs. And again, you see here that you do have individual gain staging for that. We also do the same thing for the IP streaming as well as the USB input and output. And you'll notice that we also have included the ability to engage delay processing for the IP and USB outputs, and that can be up to 300 milliseconds, so that I can time align my audio with any delay that there might be on the video, so that those are in sync. And then the big eye chart is our matrix. So I can assign all of my routing to any cross point on the matrix, and you'll notice that if I click on any of those cross points, I can adjust my gain staging accordingly for that. Questions, comments, thoughts, inquiries, hallucinations?
Bob, one question that we have from the audience is that what issues should we be concerned with when using a device in an enterprise network?
Well, one issue you should always be concerned about is security, right? And so if we're dealing with IP streaming, obviously that's a question that is invariably integrally tied to the function of the IT network manager as well. This is a unicast device. We incorporate standard security protocols, but we also enable the IP streaming to be disabled. As a matter of fact, it ships disabled out of the box, so that if you were just using this as a USB interface, you wouldn't have to worry about the IP streaming functions. As with any IP related device on the network, consult the smartest person available for security measures, and then talk to somebody who's realistic about it, right? So, other questions?
Yeah, I see there's another question, Bob, that's can the 2 HDMI inputs be different flavors?
Different flavors as far as resolution goes? Is that the...
Don't know.
Is that my assumption on that?
That was a direct quote.
Let's go with that. Let's say one's 720p and one's 1080i. Can it take both of them, or Can it take a 720p and a 1080p and then convert them all? Does it do, or does they all have to be 720p or all 1080p? Does it change it? Does it allow you to adjust the resolution for what your input is?
You know what? That's a darn good question. And I am going to find out the answer for you. Either before we hang up or shortly thereafter.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know that.
Bob mentioned that the device is able to execute macros based off of simple trigger recalls. So this is where you would use your macro editor to build that macro and then assign it to one of the hardware triggers. This is really designed primarily for applications where you want to do some basic type of automation. Maybe it's switching inputs, turning the stream on and off, swapping your picture-in-picture, but they don't want to necessarily have any type of control system, or they don't want to have to defer to using the web interface to execute that control. So we build a macro editor and simple function there to execute those basic functions. A lot of that is available as well from the front panel, which incidentally can be locked out. But you don't necessarily, if this is in a podium or a rack someplace that isn't necessarily close to where the presenter is going to be, the front panel does not become particularly useful then. So in the IP streaming interface, you'll notice the checkbox here that will enable me to engage the IP streaming. And then at the advanced level in custom configuration, I can select not only my resolution, but also my frame rate, and select whether or not I'm going to run as a constant or variable bit rate, depending on the stability of my network. If I'm streaming in an RTMP protocol, i.e. something like YouTube or Facebook or Twitter, you'll notice I come in here to my different services that I'm going to assign. I'm going to set that account up with Facebook or wherever it might be. They're going to give me my URL and my key. I'm going to assign those to those various inputs and then can turn them on or off via any of the control functions that we've previously mentioned. We do have the ability to define what the user interface is going to look like. So I'm logged into this user interface as an administrator. I have a password level for that, but there's also a user level which has a much smaller defined set of capabilities. And so this gives me the ability to adjust some of those functions for what the end user would have access to if they did not have administrative privileges.
Hey, Bob.
Yes, sir.
Could you go back to the video outputs?
Yep.
You can select the resolution on the output, correct?
That is correct. 1080p 60, 5994, all the way down to 720p.
Okay.
Yep. And again, that is just to the HDMI output.
And I texted the factory that Rob is not available. Stephanie is 92% sure that you can have different formats on the input, but we'll confirm that.
All right, I'm going to stop sharing here. And we're back. Mr. Hivner, other comments?
I don't think so. Any other questions from anyone, or anything that isn't on there that should be on there, or any other thoughts?
Just a reminder to everyone that all the Vaddio products are designed, engineered, manufactured in Minnesota. So it is a wonderfully made U.S. product, as I like to say, built by hardworking Americans who eat cheeseburgers for lunch.
Bob, I have another question. Is output fixed at 1080p 60?
It is not. No, I can do 60. I could do 5994. I could do all the way down to 720p.
And going back to the last question, just from playing around with it a little bit, I've noticed that it doesn't say what the HDMI input is, what flavor it is. You know, what is it? 1080i, 1080p, 720p. It doesn't tell me that on the AV Bridge web interface. So I'm guessing that maybe it takes it and converts it and scan converts it. Is that a possibility?
Yes, that's what while Bob was talking there, I was texting with one of the applications engineers, and that's what she thought, that she wasn't able to absolutely confirm it. So we'll find out and get back to you on it. But she said she's quite sure that it does do that it would scale whatever comes in and then put it out at whatever the output is. So
Yeah, I want to see if I can find out for sure what input resolutions are supported, particularly if they're dissimilar between the two inputs. That's the
yeah.
Does anybody else have any other questions? I'm not hearing anything right now.
Anybody else?
Okay. Okay, so we're at 150 right now. If anybody does have any questions on there, I'm going to make myself, but thank you very much. If anybody does have any questions, just email us and let us know. We do have a Facebook page. We do have the email. There is a link that Steve sent out. So thank you all very much for attending this webinar today. We have a couple more planned coming up, and you will receive email invites for the rest of them. But speaking for Philadelphia SMPTE, I thank you very much for watching these. Bob and Bob, thank you very much for